This is really nice. I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd, but just wanted to give you a little bit of my background, how I got involved in politics, and why I'm running for governor right now. So I am a born and raised Wisconsinite. My mom grew up on a dairy farm in western Wisconsin, so rural she went to a one-room schoolhouse through 8th grade. And she's not 120. She's going to turn 81 at the end of this year. She became a teaching assistant for children with special needs and a proud union member. My father served in the Navy during Vietnam and then came back to fix telephones for Wisconsin Bell. We didn't have a lot growing up, but service to community was non-negotiable in my family. And I'm trying to take that with me into my adult life. After college, I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I served in Samoa in the South Pacific, did HIV/AIDS and reproductive health education. I am my daughter's Girl Scout leader. And we actually do barn chores every Sunday night. We take care of the Humane Society's horses and goats. So if you're wondering if I can deal with big buckets of shit, I can. I'm a nurse by background. I've done everything from night shifts in the emergency department all the way to running big public health programs. And that's what I thought I was going to do. That's how I was going to serve my community. I voted. I paid attention. I maybe threw a couple of dollars at a candidate who inspired me, but I was not as involved in politics. And that really changed in 2016. It's the first time Donald Trump came across our radar. I know. And as many of you know, my husband is an immigrant from Mexico. He's a naturalized citizen. And my son was 8 years old at the time, and he was in the kitchen, and he was worried. And he asks me, Mommy, what happens if Trump wins? Will he make Daddy go back to Mexico? Will he make me go to Mexico? I know he doesn't like people who look like me. And it broke my heart that man's words had gotten into my child's head. And then I had to wake him up in November and tell him he was safe. And tell him he belonged. And that nobody could make him leave his country. But I told myself I was never going to feel that way again. That I had not done enough to make sure that man was not elected into office. That I relied on other people, probably some of you in this room, to advocate for families like mine. And so right after that, I went down to the Waukesha County Democratic Party meeting and I said, put me to work. I will do anything. I will knock doors, I will make phone calls. I need to put this anger and frustration somewhere. And that's what I did for 4 years. And then in 2020, with the chaos of the Trump administration, this was during COVID, I had been an epidemic intelligence service officer with the Centers for Disease Control, did national and international outbreak investigations. I knew how dangerous it was to receive misinformation from our leadership. So I decided to run for assembly in District 13 and was able to flip that district from red to blue with a 4-term Republican incumbent. And I want to remind you that I live in Waukesha County. So then I stepped up again when Governor Evers needed a partner for his second term. And I won my primary statewide for lieutenant governor and then won with Governor Evers in the general with 3.5 percentage points, as he calls it, a landslide in the state of Wisconsin. And I've been so lucky to serve with him, to watch his leadership, especially with a hostile legislature. But I knew what I was going to do when that man won a second time. If Governor Evers was not going to run for a third term, I was going to run for governor. Because we needed somebody who was going to stand strong against the Trump administration, who was going to protect Wisconsinites. Look, I have been to all 72 counties every year. I have been lieutenant governor. And people tell me the same thing, that they are doing everything right, but still feeling squeezed. Whether that is accessible, affordable health care, whether that's the cost of housing. That little 8-year-old boy, he's 19 now. I would love for him to live here, build a life here, start a family here. He's not going to be able to do that if he can't afford to live here. And the average age for a first-time home buyer is 40 years old. That tells me we are not making homes that young families and young people can afford. Whether that's the cost of childcare, if you can find it, costs more than your mortgage or your rent. The federal government's affordability standard is no more than 7% of your income. Average costs across the state of Wisconsin, just average, a family would have to be making $185,000 a year to afford one child in childcare, and I had 2 under the age of 5. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to treat it like the infrastructure that it is, no more than 7% of your income. And good Lord, do we have to fully fund our public schools?
Yes.
We continue to vote to raise our own taxes, not for a new middle school, not for a new science lab, but to keep the doors open, the lights on, and our teachers paid. That is broken, and we need to fix it. And we've got to restore union bargaining rights in the state of Wisconsin. We know that lifts wages for union and non-union alike. And we've got to protect our environment, not only for future generations like my kids, but we have a huge outdoor recreation tourism economy in the state of Wisconsin that continues to grow. We've got to make sure we preserve and protect that. Now, I wish everybody felt the same way that I did. We should actually be working for everyday Wisconsinites. But you've got Tom Tiffany, and there is no daylight between him and Donald Trump.
No.
He has said tariffs are a good thing in Wisconsin. Tariffs that increase your groceries are a good thing. He has said he would welcome federal agents into the state. He doesn't see anything wrong with what happened in Minneapolis. I was one of the first primary candidates to put out a statement about what we should do with federal agents in Wisconsin. Unmasked, clearly identifiable, wearing body cams. They could not indiscriminately pick people up based on the color of their skin or the language that they speak. They could not go into sensitive spaces like churches, healthcare system, domestic violence shelters, which they did in Minneapolis, and they needed a judicial warrant.
Yeah.
And his stance on reproductive health care is so extreme, he has taken it off his website. Seriously. He has supported a 6-week ban with no exceptions except for the life of the mother. Not health, not incest, not rape, not a terminal diagnosis, none of that. That's what we're dealing with. We have such an enormous opportunity this election to have majorities in both the Assembly and the Senate. We need to flip 2 seats in the Senate. The maps look good. I'm bullish on it. We're going to get it done. Yes. 5 in the Assembly. 4 of those were within a percentage point when Trump was on the ballot. We have a 5% swing, and clearly we have seen more in Wisconsin and nationally. We have majorities that we have not seen in almost 20 years. But here's the thing. We've got 2 years. 2 years to make a demonstrable difference in people's lives. 2 years to show them what it looks like when Democrats govern, or they will flip that Assembly right back to Republicans. So you're going to need somebody who is ready day one to get there across the finish line. So I strongly believe my background outside of politics, as well as being lieutenant governor, well prepares me to run something as large as the state government. But I've also maintained my relationships in the Senate and the Assembly, and I have the most endorsements of sitting legislators today. And that's built on trust. So I would ask you to join my fight. Vote for me this August 11th to get across the finish line in the primary, and then again in November, so we can show them what it looks like when we take care of everyday Wisconsinites, when Democrats govern. Thank you guys so much for that.
Just stand up.
When you're done, I don't want to mess up your agenda. So,
Just stand up.
I saw one question right away.
So the Milwaukee Courier just published today a report that you previously accepted campaign funds from We Energies. During the same year that you accepted those campaign funds, We Energies customers, including people in Adams County, saw an increase of up to $300. How do you address this? And how can we trust you going forward that you're going to be for us and not for corporate We Energies?
So I appreciate that question, and what we responded to within the article, within the Milwaukee Courier, was that that particular legislation also was able to reduce taxes on small businesses, and that legislation is something that the governor signed. I have consistently made decisions based on what's right for Wisconsin and not about anybody's powerful interests. This campaign has not taken any corporate PAC money. And we're continuing not to do that. And I would say, look at what I voted for, and look at what I've done as Lieutenant Governor, as well as being within the Assembly. And I think you can see how I'm going to fight for everyday Wisconsinites.
At least one of your opponents has endorsed legalizing recreational marijuana in Wisconsin. What is your position on that?
So I am fully on board with legalizing and regulating marijuana in the state of Wisconsin. Governor Pritzker thanks me every time he sees me for how many of you give him your tax dollars, right? Your tax dollars from Illinois. Look, I'm a nurse by background. Marijuana is not harm-free, right?
Michigan's cheaper.
Michigan's cheaper. It is not harm-free, but I think if we regulate it appropriately, keep it out of kids' hands, I think this is something we can do. And we could have so much of that tax revenue coming into Wisconsin that we can put towards our public schools. Our two teenagers are 17 and 19. They lack frontal lobes and critical thinking skills, right? Sorry, teenagers in the room, you do. And so I'm not under no illusion that they might do something stupid. But what I tell them is, because it's not regulated in the state of Wisconsin, you don't know what you're getting. So it could be laced with fentanyl, it could be laced with other things. It could, you need to make sure that you're really careful in what happens. And so I think that if we regulate it appropriately, we're able to use that tax revenue to, fund things like our public schools, like the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund. Those are the kind of things we can use those tax dollars for. And we're going to need new revenue in the state of Wisconsin. We are. Because with all the cuts at the federal level, we're going to have to do more as a state with less. I'm just going to go down the line, and then you. This one here, and then you. Yes.
So, two things. One of which I am running for the Assembly.
Thank you. You're welcome. I really do. Honestly, thank you so much. I know how hard it is. Thank you for doing that.
For the 70 seconds. I'm excited about that. But my true question is about AI. And putting guardrails on AI. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So I'm going to talk about data centers first, and then I'm going to talk about what comes out of the data centers, which is AI. So my approach for data centers is we need to have minimum regulation at the state level, like baseline regulation. That includes community benefit agreements, which includes community input on whether or not a data center comes into the community. When I'm speaking to people all across the state, they haven't found out about the data center until the ink's already dry in the contract. Like, that's unacceptable. We need to have community input. They need to pay enhanced energy rates, not just what they're using, but enhanced energy rates, because there's going to be maintenance on the grid, and they're going to have transmission lines that are coming into that data center. And so we want to make sure they're not just paying for what they're using, but all of these other costs, so it doesn't get on the backs of taxpayers. And they have to invest in renewable energies in the state of Wisconsin. That's how we get to carbon neutral by 2050, which is what our goal is right now within the administration, what I will continue to do. Water can't be under an NDA. We have to know how much. And if they're taking it out of the system and putting it back in, it has to be at the same temperature and quality as they took it out. And the fines have to be real with teeth, because it's a $10,000 fine. These are billion-dollar companies. That's the cost of doing business, right? And so that's the floor. And then communities could have stricter regulations, or they could say not in my backyard, and that's okay. And I'll just, it might not, it makes sense for some communities. When I think about like Foxconn, okay, what a debacle that was. Not doing anything for the community. They've already taken over that space. You know, it's not creating any tax revenue whatsoever. They put a data center there. That made sense for that community, right? But it may not make sense for other communities. There could be a brownfield somewhere where you can't farm it, you can't build on it, and the community doesn't have the dollars to be able to clean it up. Well, let's have the data center come up, you know, clean that up and put a data center there. That might make sense for that community, but it doesn't make sense for every community. So that's my big, and then AI, I put out a whole thing about how we need to make sure that we are addressing tech in general, but AI specifically. And so other states have gone in with, you know, like some places they'll do, what's it called? It's the pricing thing where basically you walk up to it and they know who you are and what you do, and then they give you the price of that product based on how much they think you'll pay for it. Dynamic, thank you, dynamic pricing. So other states have not allowed that, and that's something that I would consider at the state level as one of the uses for AI. We have to also make sure that a human is involved in this piece. Like, I do see some good things for AI within the medical field. Like, to be able to gather all of this information all together and to be able to look at a different sort of differential diagnosis. Like, one person can't always get all that information in their head, but I still want a human, a physician or a nurse practitioner looking at that information to make sure it makes sense. And then just in tech overall, you know, we know what happens with our kids and tech and social media. We know what it does to their mental health. It is awful, right? It's the one thing that I regret as a parent. I waited a really long time to give my kids phones. I honestly wish I would have waited even longer because it's awful. And so one of my things is that they cannot be using our data kids' data to advertise to them. They can't do infinite scrolling. They can't, you know, we have stronger protections for kids online, and we can sue them if they harm our children. And we've seen a little bit of that nationally of being able to be sued. I mean, right now, it's on the parents to be able to put these restrictions on their kids, and it is not a fair fight. My husband's a network engineer, okay? I have a daughter who is brilliant. Oh my gosh, brilliant. She gets around everything he does. Everything, every restriction she does. We gave her a flip phone, she went on Instagram. I don't even know how that's possible, right? Like, I'm just like, okay, she figured it all out. So the kids are smarter than we are, and they figure this out way faster than we do. And so trying to make sure that we've got, the restrictions should be on the tech end, not on the parents' end. It's just not a fair fight.
Right.
So that was one of the things that I put out there recently. It's on my website. Okay.
With all the craziness that's going on in the world, what keeps you up at night, and what are you worried most about?
That's a good question. What I'm worried about the most is that the healthcare cuts that we're talking about haven't shown up yet. They're after the midterms.
That's right.
Yeah.
So people think what's happening now with your premiums increasing and all of these things happening, like, okay, well, you know, okay, we're still stable right now, it's gonna be okay. They're coming after the midterms. And so what worries me is the spiral, especially in rural healthcare, because they rely on Medicaid and Medicare way more than our urban and suburban healthcare systems do, and those cuts are gonna hurt them even more. So part of my plan is, yes, a public option on the exchange to be able to, it's based off of Colorado's model. It has a 5% reduction in premiums every year, some cost transparency in that. Expansion of Medicaid, it's gonna be harder for us to do, but I still think it's the right thing to do. And rural health stabilization funds. Right now there's a rural health innovation fund, but it requires you to do, and that's for the federal government, which is, yes, we've applied for it, all of those things, but it requires you to do like new programs. It's not for basic services, right? It's for innovative new things. So we've got to stabilize rural healthcare until we can fix what Trump and Tom Tiffany have broken.
What are you going to do to better the educational systems, like making sure that schools have the things that they need to teach future generations?
I thank you so much for that question. So I'm a product of public school. My kids go to public schools, right? And we have not met our obligation as a state for our public school system. We used to be the education state, right? People would come here for our school districts. And Governor Evers has done a really good job from the Walker administration to bring us back up. There's still a ton of work to do. So right now, how we fund our schools, okay, we are top 10 in the country for property taxes. You wanna know why? Because we fund our schools through referendums that increase our property taxes, right? That's one reason, and the second reason is we do not fund our cities and municipalities appropriately so that they can actually pay for EMS, fix the roads, make sure your parks stay open and your pools stay open. We've got to fix those two things. What we need to do is move away from property taxes by funding schools and meet our 2/3 obligation as a state. We also have not fixed the funding formula in the state of Wisconsin in like 30 years. Yeah. So it is outdated, it is broken, we are not funding special education appropriately. So my plan has 90% reimbursement for special education, and it's a firm reimbursement, so it's actually sum sufficient. People who are in education know what sum sufficient means, but basically right now, what happens is we estimate how much special education is going to cost, and then that's what we give to the schools, and we have been wrong every year. And so we estimate that we're going to be able to reimburse those folks, but we're always wrong, and so we reimburse them less. So we actually have to pay for how much they actually need for the special education, regardless of what our estimates are. And then we need to get away from our categorical funding. It's like we have base funding, and then we have little categorical funding. And we need to look holistically at the child and at the district that those kids are in. So we know in rural spaces, there's going to be more transportation costs. You're going to have more fixed costs than you would within an urban environment or suburban environment. In many of our urban environments, you've got really high poverty levels concentrated, in very small areas, as well as our rural spaces, high poverty as well. So we have to make sure we're looking at that holistically to make sure that we meet those 2/3 guidelines.
And regarding vouchers?
So vouchers, so we cannot get rid of the vouchers right away. We cannot do it immediately. Let me tell you why. 50% of kids in the city of Milwaukee are on a voucher today. If we cut that off tomorrow, it's not good for the child, it's not good for the community, and the Milwaukee public school system could not absorb them. So we're gonna have to do two things at the same time. We're gonna have to walk and chew gum. We're gonna have to continue to support our public school systems and build them up to where they need to be while we make changes to the voucher system. For me, if you're going to take a public dollar, you need to make sure that we have the same standards. Public, private, voucher, doesn't matter. You want to take a public dollar, we're all held to the same standards. There are many, many things, and I think probably 30% of the voucher schools would drop out just because of that. Because they don't want to hit the same standards. They don't want to do that. Secondly, right now, if you have a child and you qualify, because there's income limits on vouchers, you qualify in kindergarten, your child goes into kindergarten and then qualifies for a voucher, you never have to recheck your salary ever again. So you're in the system the whole time. I told you I have a 19-year-old, right? So he's going to college. I gotta do a FAFSA every year, right? Like I gotta do that every year. So can you imagine how much your income would change from kindergarten until senior year in high school? Like that's a huge difference. And that is, when we start making these low-hanging fruit changes, right, we're gonna get more dollars into the public school system. And so I think that's gonna be really important, when we're kind of making these changes. And right now, particularly in the state of Wisconsin, we have the worst literacy rate for Black and brown kids in the country. We are failing our kids. Like it is not teachers, we have not given them the resources to be able to do this. And so it's not just about money, but it's also about how do we make sure they have the tools and the resources to move this along. And when we talk about public safety, a predictor of incarceration is third grade literacy rate. So that's a public health issue, that's a public safety issue. Like education is an all-encompassing issue. And so we have to make sure we get it right, and that we move kids in a way that, that doesn't disrupt communities or doesn't, disrupt the kids' education.
Missy Hughes just dropped out.
She did.
She endorsed you.
She did.
Yes, she did.
Missy
And
Hughes.
one of the other candidates is really reaching out to the young people. So how are you going to also have that kind of approach with the younger voters?
Yeah, so, yes, so reaching out to younger voters is really important, and, we're going out to all the universities that we can to talk to folks, but the reality is the vast majority of people 18 to 25 are not in a university setting, they are working, and so we have to reach them in a different way. So my son horrifies me. So I turned 51 next year, so I'm Gen X, and I'm like the last of the feral generations, right? Like, I hate social media with the heat of 1,000 suns, but my son gets all of his news from YouTube and TikTok, right? I mean, that's where they are at, so that's where we have to be, right? And so, am I going to be the most natural at it as somebody who's younger than I am, who's like native to that type of environment? Probably not. But as long as I'm authentically in that space and trying to communicate what I want to do for folks, I think that's going to be important. And my message is an economic one, because I want to make sure that young people can afford a home. I want to make sure that when they're ready to have families, that they get paid family leave and that we treat childcare like infrastructure. And I want to make sure when their kids are old enough to go to school, they've got a really good public school to go to, right? So, I mean, those are the kind of things that we need to talk about. And we need to make sure that we're getting that message out. And I just said this in a forum yesterday. There's one of the things that I get frustrated with within the Democratic Party is people try to like put you in little buckets, right? Who's the progressive? Who's the moderate, right? And the reality is that everybody on that stage, every Democratic governor candidate, we all want the same thing. We might disagree a little bit on strategy, a little bit on policy, but we are all wanting to make sure that we protect the most vulnerable, that we make sure that Wisconsin is a great place to raise a family and to retire in, and that we are fully funding our public schools, we are protecting our environment, we are making sure we are worker first. We are all very similar in our values and where we want to go. And so I kind of want to reject that label, right, of where you need to be. And so that is a frustration for mine, because people, they want like a horse race, right? They want it to be like, let's put you in this bucket or you in this bucket or whatever. And I think I'm bucketless. Bucketless. I'm sorry, but I saw your hand earlier.
I just wanted to, so you would support taxpayer transparency,
Yeah.
There's a lot of school districts right now, including the Adams Friendship, that is trying to get this on the tax bill so people can see where their money is going, that it's not all staying in the school district.
Yes, I would. So Green Bay is doing it now, and I would love to be able to do that statewide, because I think that also builds momentum for voter support to make sure that we're making those modifications to the voucher system as they're there. And so, yes, I would absolutely support that, because there's some rural communities that don't even have another school to go to, but some of your money's going into the voucher system. So, yes.
And with the cap of the voucher cap going off after this past school year, that's gonna make the public school system a little bit more vulnerable.
It will be, yeah. So this is why we can make these modifications, right, as we go along, and I think that's gonna be more helpful to be able to get those public dollars in public schools.
Okay, we'll do one more question.
Okay.
Denise has had her hand up forever.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Sorry, I'm right back to you. Yes, ma'am.
What are your views on appointments to the Public Service Commission? Specifically, what is the excuse for the Public Service Commission approving 31 of 31 solar projects, even if the communities did not want them, like the town of Rome?
Yeah. So so the Public Service Commission, for those of you who don't know, are the ones that approve any sort of energy projects out there. They also approve whether or not you have a new gas plant, a new coal plant. They approve rate hikes for folks across the state. And my commitment is that and it's the one place where the governor can appoint people to that commission. It doesn't require the Assembly and the Senate to approve that. So it's a great place to be able to make some changes.
Yeah.
And so,
There's three that need to go.
she's gonna write it down for me, and I'm gonna, okay. So what my commitment is to not make this a revolving door from the energy company to the PSC, which has happened before. It's oftentimes lawyers that go from the energy company directly to the PSC, and so they're more aligned with the energy company than they are aligned with ratepayers, right? So, and the other thing the PSC has been asking for, which is when they're doing their approval process, they can only look sort of short term on the effect of what that yes will be, right? They can't look sort of long term to say, okay, if we say yes to a coal-fired plant, which we wouldn't in the state, just as an example, there's also going to be costs to public health. There's going to be increased asthma costs. There's going to be increased environmental costs. They don't have the ability to kind of look at that holistically, and they've asked for that ability to be able to do that. So that's one thing we can change. But making sure we have people who are appointed to the PSC who have ratepayers as their primary responsibility. That is something that I've committed to as well.
What about state legislation that gives communities a say in what comes into their community? Because right now, we don't have that as citizens.
To have a say in like whether the solar farm comes in or not.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's ridiculous. That they can come in with a 10-acre barn of batteries, you know, when we're in the top 10 of areas for fires.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, how does that make any sense that our community has nothing to say? We have a volunteer fire department. We don't have that kind of equipment.
Yeah.
You know, the list just goes on of all the reasons.
Yeah. It needs reform, absolutely. And making sure that communities have input about what goes into their community is really important. I mean, Republicans talk about local control all the time, but when it push comes to shove, nope, they don't do it. So making sure that we've got those decisions at as far down as we can to have that community input is really important. So thank you for bringing that up as well. All right, that was the last question. Thank you, Denise. All right, thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you for everything you guys do.